Well, I just took down 2 large fir trees, and it represented a little bit of change in my prescription. I'm not sure if you can see, but I have a group of 3 fir trees behind me that I initially painted. And the 2 trees I just took down were not painted. And basically what happened is I was just kind of looking around as I was cutting and determining what trees would make the most sense to take. And I decided to leave this kind of group of trees as a cluster. That way they're supporting each other, they're all still putting on good growth, and most importantly, you have kind of a stream bed over here and an older trail right here. So every tree has a little bit of sunlight on each side, so they're not really hampering each other that much. On the other hand, over in this area, you actually had a fair amount of regen that, as you can see, whoops, wasn't terribly healthy, but it was here, and if it had more sunlight, it would have prevented their impending mortality. So what I decided to do was release these 2 trees, and then we have this beautiful area right here where there's a lot of regen, and there's some behind the camera too. But if you actually look closely, you can see a lot more right down on the forest floor. Let me show you what I mean. So here we actually have a little cedar tree, and I do not have much cedar on this property. In fact, I only have about 3 trees, one of which is very nearby, so it's probably the parent of this one. And if I have the opportunity, I want to be able to increase the diversity on the property. And so if I can kind of grow a little bit more cedar and seed it in, that's a great opportunity to do so. Now also here in this area we have this moss, which I find works as a really great medium for germinating all types of softwoods. It holds moisture, it tends to keep the soil a little cooler, and it really just allows for the perfect conditions for fir, spruce, and cedar all to germinate and grow. And I think it's proof with these germinants right here. So if you look closely, it almost blends right in with the moss. But these are balsam fir germinants right here. Probably only a few years old, but they don't have a very high chance of survival unless they get some sunlight. So ensuring that there's just a little bit of sunlight that they can get, they will continue to grow. And next time I come in here and take this patch of fir right next to this area, then they'll be fully released and they can be ready to replace that cohort. And that's forestry. It's the continual regenerative cycle, right? And so I really wanted to show this to you guys because I've talked about, the growth of residual stems and the sigmoid-shaped curve of a tree, but I haven't really talked much about recruiting regeneration, or at least not in depth at all. And this is barely in depth. But I wanted to show you kind of what my thought process was. Part of the goal of this harvest is to maintain an uneven age stand, and that involves creating small openings where the stand can regenerate. And in this case, all I'm really doing is allowing regeneration that already exists to flourish and not die off as it's already on the trajectory to do. And so just by creating these small gaps, I can really recruit some of those species, and then next time I enter the stand, I can make this gap a little bigger. The regeneration that's here can further grow and take off with more sunlight. It creates a regenerative cycle, but also kind of a continuous cover style forestry where there's always trees of every age class, and it can sustain a harvest every 5-10 years depending on your removal. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about with forestry, is they think about it in terms of a single tree. They'll say, oh, timber takes too long to grow because a tree might take 50 years to reach maturity. And while that's true, you're just looking at a tree microscopically. You can do even age management and clear cut a stand, and yeah, then you're not going to be able to see the final felling of that stand until age 50 or whatever it is. But if you're doing this more selection type system and continuous cover, even if you don't necessarily see this tree grow to maturity, you can get a lot of satisfaction just watching it grow and seeing your efforts pay off. All the while you're harvesting the other trees that are growing in around it. And that's a really cool thing. My first job in forestry was actually managing planting spruce, and I still love going past the first spruce plantations that I was working on and seeing just how far those have progressed. There's a great deal of satisfaction in that. And that's one of my favorite parts of forestry, is just watching the progression of the forest over the years. It teaches you an awful lot. So anyway, that's all. I got to get back to work. But I wanted to share this with you guys, kind of how my thought process changed in this particular area and what this area represents for the future of this forest. It's really important to understand, and I'm very excited. Well, I'm excited to see how this entire stand is going to progress, but you know, these little areas I'm just taking mental note of, and I'll be really excited to see what happens over the next few years. So, until next time, later.